It's been 100 days since the iPhone 16s were released, and one of the biggest changes that Apple gave us is camera control. Let's talk about it. The iPhone was introduced in 2007, and at that time, the shutter button on the camera app was the only way to take a photo. In 2011, with iOS 5, Apple made the volume buttons on the sides of the iPhone act as the shutter button. With the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, we got a new button, the Action button, which could be customized to do anything you wanted, including acting as the shutter button if you set it up to open the camera. Last year, with the new iPhone 16s, we have a new control that allows us to open the camera and also to take photos. Apple does not want to call this a button, but that's essentially what it is, and people are calling it a button anyway. I'm gonna call it a button too. I've had the iPhone 16 Pro Max since launch day, and the camera control was the feature I was most excited about. I set up my phone and tried using it for a few minutes, only to realize it was more complicated than I had expected. There's a press, a double press, a click, and swipe gestures. This button, or rather control, has a lot going on for it. And after more than using it for 100 days, there are a few things I like and a few things I do not like. Let's just get to it. Let's talk about the position of the control. This is my Fuji X-T3. The shutter button is exactly where you'd expect it to be ergonomically. You pick up the camera and the button naturally falls where you'd expect to click and take a photo. However, on my iPhone, the camera control isn't at the ideal position, at least for me. After holding the iPhone in a certain way for over a decade, when I pick up my phone and I hold it by the sides, I expect my right index finger to land exactly where the camera control is. But it doesn't. Instead, I have to hold my phone slightly differently, covering the bottom right of the iPhone screen for the camera control to feel ideally placed. When you use the camera control, the UI elements of the camera disappear, which I think might be intentional to reduce the chances of unintended inputs. This can be turned off, but by default the UI disappears, giving you a clean interface to navigate via the camera control. When I hold the phone vertically, however, the camera control is in the ideal spot. It still takes a bit of getting used to, especially when I have to click to take a photo, but the placement of the control is perfect. It's exactly where my thumb would naturally rest. I think the location of the control is a compromise between landscape and portrait orientations. Also, visual intelligence seems to be primarily used when holding the phone vertically, and this could have influenced where the camera control was positioned on the side of the phone. After using this phone for over 3 months, I've now adapted to holding the phone in a way that lets me use the camera control more comfortably. Although it's not ideal yet, I've learned to make it work. Ask me in a few months or years and I might say this is in the ideal spot. The biggest issue I have with camera control is that I keep forgetting that it exists. The shutter button on the UI is mostly how I have been taking pictures regardless of holding the phone in landscape or portrait, and I still find myself going for this UI button. In terms of getting to the camera app itself, I'm glad we have the new camera control, but personally, I still think the action button from last year is the fastest way to get to the camera. This might purely be because I've had more time with this action button than the camera control. When the iPhone 16's launched, the camera control would only take you to the camera app if the display was active. So when your phone was in your pocket and you wanted to take it out and be ready to take a picture, clicking the camera control did not help. You would have to ensure that the display was lit up and then click the camera control button. Or there was an accessibility setting where you could double click the camera control button and it would take you to the camera. With iOS 18.2 though, this has now changed. You can now get to the camera quickly by a single click of the camera control button. The camera control does a lot. It's a single button that essentially lets you handle everything you need to take the kind of photo you want. Take a real camera for example. The shutter speed and the exposure controls are not all linked to the same button, toggle or switch or dial. Even in the iPhone camera app, everything is a visual element on screen, but not everything is in one location or hidden behind a single UI element. With the camera control, a press brings up the adjustment dial for the specific setting you want to change. For example, if you are on the exposure dial, you can change the exposure up or down. A double press gives you access to all the menus: exposure, zoom, focal length, camera lenses, styles, etc. You swipe on the button to move between the items in the menu, and then press again to enter a specific menu and make your adjustments. Every input you need before taking a photo is done through presses and swipes, all of which provide great haptic feedback as you navigate the menus. Once you have made your adjustments, you have to press the button like a real button to take the photo. This kinda feels odd because the button you just clicked doesn't look like any other button on the iPhone. Its recessed, stays flush with the sides of your iPhone, and your brain has to pause and think before pressing it. iOS 18 is the most customizable version of iOS that Apple has released so far, yet camera control feels more restrictive, despite its capabilities. I'd like to see further customization options with the camera control settings, such as the ability to disable features that I never want to use with the camera control, like zoom. I've always maintained that taking a photo with the 0.5, 1x, 2x, or 5x lenses and then cropping the image later yields much better results than using digital zoom. So I don't want the ability to digital zoom, I just want to switch lenses. I wish in the future Apple can give us granular features where I can turn off certain settings that I know I don't want to use. The most annoying issue with camera control is actually related to photographic styles. This seems to be a bug that Apple's QA team missed, though no one appears to be reporting on it. Since the iPhone 14 Pro, I've been shooting in RAW, and I intend to keep doing so. In the camera app, when you enable RAW, the photographic styles option disappears, meaning you can't apply styles to RAW images. However, in the camera control menu, the style and tone options don't disappear when RAW is selected. So you can use the camera control to change styles and tones to your heart's content. Take a photo only to find that none of the styles or the tone adjustments that have been applied, because you were shooting in RAW. I hope this gets fixed soon, as it's not the experience one would expect from Apple. If you've been watching this video so far, you might think I don't like what Apple has given us. In fact, it's the opposite. When I first unboxed my phone, I played around the camera control and I did not like it straight away. However, in the last 3 months or 100 days, if I may, I've used this, I've actually become more appreciative of it. Ever since I started using iPhones, I've always pressed the shutter button in the middle of the camera app UI to take pictures. I've rarely used the volume or action buttons for taking pictures, but I've used the camera control shutter a lot more, and I know I'll continue using it. Having used iPhones since 2011, there's a lot of muscle memory associated with tapping the white circular button on the camera app, but I can see camera control actually taking over. Not all the time though. There's definitely more satisfaction in using the camera control. This might be because it's new and novel and it's too early to say for sure, but for now I'm loving it. In its current state, the camera control feels very much like a 1.0 feature. There's a lot of room for improvement. If you're not completely in love with camera control, there's no harm done. It doesn't take anything away from the greatness of the new iPhones. You can simply disable it in settings, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max or the other iPhone 16s are still great phones. What I'd love Apple to do is provide more customization options for the camera control via software updates. Apple should invest in this button with more software features. Otherwise, I fear it might go in the way of the touch bar in the MacBook Pros. Surprisingly, they've allowed third-party apps to access the camera control. But I hope Apple themselves give us more first-party customization options to fine-tune the button to suit our preferences. If you have any questions about camera control, leave a comment and I'll get back to you ASAP. Thanks for watching.